Yo, what's up? So, I recently completed reading The Wheel of Time. All 14 books. I didn't read New Spring, not yet. I do have it, I'm planning on reading it, but I read everything from The Eye of the World to Memory of Light. It's officially over. It's been a journey of about 2 years, a little bit more, reading it kind of on and off. With the series that long, with that much of a build-up, I have quite a bit as far as thoughts go about the ending, and so while it's still kind of fresh in my mind, I wanted to make this video and just discuss it a little bit. I want to not only discuss the ending and different aspects of it, but also I want to get into a little bit of the cover art, but not the actual cover art of A Memory of Light. I think it's actually quite good. It's probably, honestly, the best cover art in the series. But it does stand out in that it was done by a different artist, Michael Whelan, rather than Darrel K, who did the original art for the rest of the books up to that point. The original art, not the newer ebook covers. I think those are actually great. I want to talk about basically Darrel K, who did pass away before the release of A Memory of Light. So his cover art didn't end up making it, but he did do a cover illustration for that final book. I had seen that Darrel K, unofficial, I guess, or not finally used cover art before I ever read A Memory of Light, before I read the ending. And it gave me a certain idea of what the ending might be for Rand, and that didn't end up being what happened, but I want to talk about what an alternative ending could have been and what it would have meant for the series. So I'll talk a little bit about that. I'll talk a little bit about the actual ending. I have a decent bit to say, I think. We'll get to that. And by the way, this video will contain full spoilers for the series, obviously. So I would recommend finishing it. I no matter what I say, positive or negative in this video, I enjoyed the series greatly. It's immediately one of my favorite series I've ever read. I don't have a ton of experience in fantasy, but one of my favorite fantasy series so far, at least. Highly, highly recommend it. If you're interested at all, I wouldn't watch this video before you finish it. But yeah, so 14 books, right? Years and years. I mean, decades of the same story and the same characters, going from naive kids, basically, from a small farming village, a small farming community that know nothing about the outside world, to being these world leaders and some of the most important people on the planet, and having this both physical war, like combat, regarding, fighting the Trollocs and everything, and then Rand, of course, having this like cosmic war against the Dark One. I mean, so much evolution, character arcs, just pages and pages, over 4 million words of these characters. How do you end that in a satisfying way? How do you end that in a way that really is going to feel like it works and everything has come to a close and really concludes everything? There's a lot to think about when doing something like that. Overall, I think Brandon Sanderson, I think he did a great job. And I think, I don't know how much of it was his writing or on his own merit, or how much of it was, Robert Jordan's notes. Either way, it was done amazingly. And overall, I'm very satisfied. So first we'll talk about the actual ending, and then I'll talk about my weird experience with the original, with the Darrel K cover in a minute. So first of all, what did happen, right? The last battle was had. It was this big action-packed moment. It was like a 200-page chapter. I actually originally thought that was kind of going to be the main bit there, that the last battle was going to happen, and the end of that chapter was the end of like the action of the, like, that was the climax, and then the rest of the chapters were kind of going to be almost like a lengthy epilogue. I think maybe I just had Lord of the Rings in my mind, where it ends after I believe the third chapter of book 6, the second half of Return of the King. I'm not sure exactly what chapter it would be in that entire book, but it ends quite early, like just over halfway through the Return of the King, I believe, and the rest of the chapters are just kind of epilogue, like they go back home and you hear kind of just the downward slope of the action goes on for quite a bit. That's really not what happened with the Wheel of Time, surprisingly, even though they had a lot more time to like a lot more page time, I would think, to work with. No, it did not end. The last battle does not end at the end of the last battle chapter. It goes on until the very last chapter, when everything finally comes to a conclusion, and then the epilogue is like an actual brief, like a real epilogue, but it is brief. The climax of the book is right up there at the end in chapter 49. I believe it's called Light and Shadow. So I suppose I have the book next to me. I could probably look, but I'm gonna go off my memory on that one. So basically, when I originally saw the that Darrel K suite cover, the one that's not the actual cover, I thought that Rand would die, and I want to get more into what exactly that means to me in a minute. But before I do, I want to talk about, obviously, the actual ending. Rand does not die. Rand survives, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it is actually, I was confused initially when I read it a little bit, but I think it was adequately explained, adequately foreshadowed, and set up that Rand could survive. The prophecies didn't say specifically that he would die. They said, it could be interpreted that way, but it wasn't explicitly that interpretation. He obviously was very convinced he would die. For an example, Min was not. She would constantly kind of reinforce, doesn't say you have to die, Rand, you're not going to die. And he was just kind of being a doomer about it and was like, no, I'm going to die, which, I mean, at a certain point, if you're basically fighting like the essence of Satan, I suppose I might think I'd die too. But in the end, of course, yeah, he doesn't. And I think it's fine, because how it happens is very interesting, where, he did, kind of, right? Rand was dying. His body was dying. But what he was able to do was essentially, due to a connection he had previously established with Moradin, he was able to switch his soul to Moradin's body that was not dying, and then vice versa. Moradin's soul went into Rand's body, which was dying, and that actually kind of was a conclusion for both characters. That was what Moradin wanted. I mean, whatever we think of it, that's what Moradin wanted. He wanted the pattern to end because he believed that basically his existence and his continued resurrection was suffering, and he wanted that suffering to end. And Rand, while he was accepting of his potential demise, he ultimately wanted to survive. He loved the people around him. He loved the world. He obviously was trying to save it. So he was okay with dying. And so it was interesting. And I think it was okay, actually, that he didn't die. Like, I don't think that diminishes what happened, what he did sacrifice still, and the deeds he accomplished. I think it's actually completely fine. And then, of course, it was interesting, the scene where his like 3 girlfriends were not, they weren't worried about him dying, because Nynaeve was all trying to interrogate them and trying to pry questions out of him. And what it was because they all still felt his bond, and they felt his bond grow because his soul was not dying. And Olivia ended up fulfilling a little bit of a vision with helping him kind of escape, getting him ready with different clothes, a horse, money, whatever. And he was able to kind of escape, and he rides away, and he tries to channel. He can't. He even tries to channel the true power just in case, and he can't touch it, he can't reach it. And he's completely fine with this and very at peace with it, which is interesting. We've previously seen characters stilled or burnt out of the one power, and they are not doing, they don't do well. They often die or lose their will to live. Rand doesn't, because, as he's riding, he pulls out his pipe, and he has no way to light it. And he just sort of wills it to be lit, which is kept, it's very weird, right? It happens like very fast, and it's purposely kept vague, and I think that's okay. He seemingly, in his battle with the Dark One, reweaving different realities together and like the pattern itself, he gains some sort of higher understanding or higher ability with the pattern, where he's literally able to just will things to happen. At least that's kind of the popular interpretation, I believe, and that makes sense to me. And I like that that's all it's left at, is just like, oh, he was able to do that. That's crazy. What the fuck? And yeah, and I thought overall it was satisfying. I was okay with that. Any complaints that I have about the ending directly are, there's basically 2 points that I want to bring up. One of those is a lack of certain characters' reunions or conclusions, mainly reunions. We'll talk about reunions, right? There was some interesting lack of reunions of certain characters. For one, the big one here, kind of just the Emmonsfield Five in general, and especially the three boys, right? Rand, Matt, and Perrin. They never are all together with each other, all three of them, after like the beginning of the Shadow Rising and in the Stone of Tyr, ever, which is crazy. You like absolutely insane that didn't happen, and there was ample opportunity to. And I think this is a genuine complaint. Like, this is a genuine issue I have. It doesn't completely break it for me or anything, but it's just like, it really should have happened. There could have also been Matt and his father and his sister. There could have been people who pointed out Moraine and Suan. There's these character reunions that we thought were going to happen, and that any reader would be expected to think were going to happen, and they ended up not. And it is disappointing, but again, it doesn't totally break the novel for me or anything like that. It doesn't ruin the fucking ending. Now, I also wrote a note here about the other kind of complaint, was that I kind of expected, so I get it, it was the last battle, right? It's a battle. I expected a little more explanation. And see, maybe I was reading the series wrong, and maybe I was reading into it the wrong way. Some of the information reveals and the big like lore drops and the drops about like what was really going on in certain aspects of the world were some of the most mind-blowing parts of the series for me. The Dedicated is probably my favorite chapter of the entire series. It's either that or Veins of Gold, one or the other, but the Dedicated, where we learn kind of officially that the Age of Legends was like almost like the future, right? It was like futuristic technology and stuff, and the world worked totally differently, and that this isn't a pre-industrial or pre-modern society or whatever. It's post. There was the breaking of the world was like an apocalyptic event that set people back, and that like a lot of the things that are seen that aren't really explained are like technology. Like, I believe the water cloaks are kind of actually technology, the way that they're color shifting and stuff. There's some sort of technology that we don't fully understand. And then there's hints in the series that the first age is, of course, literally like our age, like currently. Tom says a bunch of things that like kind of hint back to stories that have changed over the ages and are a little different to understand. Names were changed a little bit. There's interesting things there. And you get what I mean, basically. These big reveals of information, how the world truly works. Because there's a lot of things that I feel like I wanted to see full explanations for, full reveals for, right? There was part of me that didn't want to accept that, like, oh, the Iofin and the Eilfin, they just exist. They're just there. They live in, like, these other dimensions or whatever. And there's no real explanation. And there doesn't have to be, right? Most fantasy doesn't delve particularly into explanations about that kind of thing, I wouldn't say. I mean, some things you just accept as part of the world. Like, that's just how the world works. And that's fine. I don't know why. I think with chapters like The Dedicated and certain other, like, information reveals, and the fact that it was kind of hinted that, like, the first age was the current day, they kind of prepped me for more information reveals that didn't end up happening. I thought there was going to be some kind of big reveal about the one power, or the true power maybe, or whatever, like, that there was going to be some big drop or reveal about the way that magic works, that maybe it was completely different than the way we understand it, that it wasn't just some cosmic force out there, that there was like maybe someone created it or something like that. But no, it seems like it is just a cosmic force from the creator or whatever, and the true power obviously from the Dark One, which is okay. It's, but there are some elements that I wish were explored a little more. Like, what, the true power is just such a weird thing. Like, it's so much more powerful than the one power. I thought maybe something would happen with that. Obviously, in the Age of Legends, they tried to get to the Dark One, to get to the true power, and it obviously backfired. I thought maybe that would be explored a little bit more. Maybe Rand would figure out the way to do it. Not that has to happen, but there was just a little more that I expected there. But it was fine, and it was a lot. It was a battle. And you know what? Also, I am completely satisfied with the Rand's battle with the Dark One being like this kind of like battle of willpower and philosophy it was fantastic. And I like that he wasn't able to defeat the Dark One in the end. Like, he learned that, like, there was the good and the bad. They both had, the Dark One has to exist. He could have defeated it entirely in that moment, the essence of, like, all evil. But he didn't. Instead, he just completely resealed everything. And that's all that needed to happen. And that's really cool to me. I did really like that. I liked Rand's battle. But I guess, yeah, there was some... I don't even think I deserve to say that, like, there should have been more explanations about certain things like that, but I kind of just wish there were. Either way, though, it is what it is. Now, this is kind of the reason that I made this video. It wasn't just to talk about that ending, but it was to instead talk about that Darrel K suite cover. So, as I said, the cover by Michael Whelan, the actual official cover, original cover for Memory of Light. Actually, it is the ebook cover too. They kept that one. I think it's actually probably the best looking cover in the series. But I also think Darrel K. Sweet's cover for the book that didn't end up being the official cover, I think that was his best looking cover for the entire series, actually. My favorite otherwise, maybe the Path of Daggers, right? Favorite cover. But no, I think it was the best looking. And I want to talk about my interpretation of it before I actually read A Memory of Light and what that could have meant if the ending went how I expected based off of that cover and just this feeling that it gives me. So I'll just give you a picture of what I thought the original cover was. I'm going to put it up on screen so you can see it and everything. But basically, what it is these three women in white. I actually am not entirely sure who they're supposed to be. I don't know if they're supposed to be like Elaine, Avienda, and Min or not. It seems wrong. I don't know why they're all dressed in white. It's kind of weird. But and they're in this field, and there's like armor and shields and shit all over the ground, and they're kind of dancing around, Rand's funeral pyre, right? They're dancing around the pyre, or moving around it or something. I interpreted it as dancing. There's these beautiful clouds, this big mountain in the background. The grass is all green. It's very fantastical. And in the background in the clouds, there's a yin-yang symbol, which I know is not entirely correct. It's basically what the ancient Aes Sedai symbol is supposed to be, but it's not entirely correct. But it gets the point across. Maybe that would have been corrected or whatever if it had become the original cover. So, first of all, I didn't really pay attention to all of the armor on the ground when I first looked at this cover, and that's going to be important because obviously it was supposed to have taken place like very soon after the last battle. But the way I saw it was I did see the pyre as some sort, as Rand, right? Either a grave for him of some sort or tomb for him, or as it is a pyre, or maybe some sort of like effigy, or just something that represents Rand, or represents the Dragon Reborn. But what I thought it was honestly I had imagined this cover as taking place well into the future of the series, like well after A Memory of Light takes place. Hundreds of years, thousands maybe, I don't know. And I imagined these three women as no one we knew, right? No one in the series that we knew. Maybe just three future Aes Sedai, or some other group that we don't know of that forms later, or whatever, right? And what I saw there was three people, hundreds and hundreds of years in the future, who we don't know, in a world that's probably completely different than what we read about at this point, but that was ultimately saved by the Dragon Reborn centuries ago. And that the people in this world would know that. They would have this idea of events that like this last battle happened, and this hero, the Dragon Reborn, this powerful channeler hero, is able to defeat the Dark One and seal him away and save their world, and now they live in this like relatively more peaceful time. And but to them, this is like their great grandparents that were actually maybe alive for this. They have no idea, they weren't there. They didn't know Rand, they didn't know Matt, they didn't know Perrin, they didn't know even Moraine, they didn't know any of these characters. And they were simply dancing around this pyre to basically, as like a celebration, or like as some kind of event or something where they honor the Dragon Reborn sacrifice. But of course, Rand is no longer alive. Rand is long dead, hundreds of years dead. And they're simply dancing around it, seeing it as this like hero, this mythical hero that sacrificed himself. But they don't know Rand. They know of the Dragon Reborn, and they know of his sacrifice, but they don't know Rand. We do, as the readers. We saw Rand. We saw him grow up. We saw him kind of come of age in a way. We saw him discover his ability to channel, discover who he truly was, discover what the prophecies were and how he fit into them, discover he was Taviran, all of these things. And we saw him ultimately become, go through his enlightenment and become more and more powerful and influential and be able to fulfill his prophecy. And now we're looking this glimpse that probably wasn't even really mentioned, wouldn't, at least the way I looked at it, wouldn't have even been mentioned in A Memory of Light. Hundreds of years in the future, who knows? Where these three women, and who cares who they are, right? They're just these three women who are maybe important, maybe not, are performing this ceremony of dancing around the pyre, this effigy of Rand, or an effigy of the Dragon Reborn to them, to celebrate what he did and how he saved their world without actually knowing who Rand was. We do. But that's all that's left there for them. And that effigy there represents who we know as Rand. And there's this strange melancholy in knowing what Rand achieved and knowing that it was good and what he did for the world and seeing that these people celebrate him, but also knowing who Rand was as a person. Like knowing Rand from the time he was essentially still a boy, right? On a sheep herder, on his farm with Tam, with his dad, and that they don't know anything about that, these people in the future. I really want you to try to sit on this and look at this cover and look at this artwork and think about it being that way. Again, my bad about the armor and stuff. Ignore all that. I kind of didn't pay attention to that the first time through. Or maybe it's, some ancient armor somehow preserved, right, from the last battle. I don't know. But just look at that cover and interpret it in that way. Suspend your disbelief of how the series actually ended, right? And just think about it that way. Think about that being the last symbol of this great Dragon Reborn, when he's been dead for hundreds of years and everyone he knows has been dead for hundreds of years, and no one knows him anymore. No one knew Rand. They just know of the Dragon Reborn, this hero of the ages. And these people are worshipping him. But we know him personally as a character. It gives me such a strange feeling of this deep satisfaction, weird, almost melancholy, and I don't know, that cover gives me such a weird feeling when I think about it that way, and it did, as I initially interpreted it that way and thought that Rand would die in the last battle. I saw that as his grave or his tomb, and I was like, that is bizarre. Maybe even something he becomes. Maybe he defeats the Dark One as his body just becomes cemented into something, as with, Luce Theron turning himself into a mountain, right? He just becomes this thing, and people go back to him, make these pilgrimages to it maybe, and they celebrate it hundreds of years, centuries into the future, without actually knowing the man, the Dragon Reborn, that we just spent all these books reading about, that we know so personally and deeply, and we saw his entire journey. But they don't, and that's okay. Things have moved on. It's the future. Rand, there is no Rand anymore. Maybe Rand's great-great-great-grandkids are still there, but even, what do they know? It just gives me an unexplainable feeling. And in a way, there was a moment reading the epilogue where I thought that Rand did die. I didn't really understand what was going on with Nynaeve questioning Aviendha and what that really meant. I didn't really know that he was going to be alive like that in Morden's body. I thought that he was dead, 100%. I thought they were going to make the pyre, and that was it. He was just dead. And then that my interpretation of the cover, could be seen as a quote-unquote correct interpretation. And I was very just taken aback with this weird feeling deep inside after reading about a character for that long, seeing him in that way. It's so beautiful, but also so strange. It's a very inexplicable feeling. I have a very hard time describing it, but I hope that in this kind of thought exercise, I guess, you were able to see what I mean, or kind of feel what I was feeling. And I can still, even though I know what happened in the end, and even though I'm okay with Rand surviving and how everything turned out, I almost think of this alternate ending in my head, and I can really make it feel real in my head and really feel something weird out of it. That's about all I have today. I just kind of wanted to discuss this ending a little bit, kind of give brief thoughts on what happened and whether it was a real satisfying ending or not, which I do think it was. you know, because after this many books, what can you really expect after 4 fucking million words, you know? And I wanted to also talk about that picture. That was why I wanted to make this video. Ultimately, was to talk about that original Darrel K Sweet artwork and how I interpreted it incorrectly the first time, but why that interpretation sticks with me so hard. It's almost one of those things where I want to expand upon that idea, but I don't know how, because it almost would take, you know, a series this long and this in depth, exploring a character like this and an arc like this, and then doing that with the ending. And, you know, I'm not going to be one to write and try to create an entire 10 plus book fantasy series to be able to just ultimately lead to that ending. But I think that's literally one of the most beautiful endings that could come out of it. And I know it's not the ending, and I still think the ending is beautiful. But yeah, I hope that you understand kind of what I mean by that. But in conclusion, good ending. But I would have totally taken it the other way too. Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about. If any of you guys have read through the whole series, let me know what you thought in the comments if you want to. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. Did you like it? Let me know in the comments if you want. I think in the future, if anyone listening is interested, I think I'm going to make a video probably ranking all the books in the series. If this video goes well, I suppose. I mean, I'm going to make it whether you're interested or not. I'm interested in making it, so if you are interested, make sure to stick around for that. But yeah, that's about it. I hope anyone listening enjoyed. Have a great day.